Hello guys, what's up and welcome back to Robot Replay. So today this is just going to be a crash course on how to use Tableau and just how to use the software for your any sort of strategy purpose, line selection, all that stuff, because it's a great data visualization tool that you can use to help assist with your line selections and just using data in general. So first of all, before we use Tableau, we're going to need to have some data that we're going to put to Tableau. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to need an Excel sheet or a Google sheet of some sort that we have data from. And that's how I found it. That's how I use it. I find all of these different, we put all of our data into different sheets, and then from the sheets we're able to take that data and put it into Tableau and then use Tableau from there to make ourselves some good data visualizations. But you do need a sheet for this beforehand, so that is a prerequisite. You need to have your data in a sheet format. So for this sheet, we're going to be using 2023 data so charged up. So what I have here is match, column for matches, column for teams, total points, auto points, tele points, and game points. And then just where people put their different mobility, for example, and different aspects of the game here. And the way that we're putting them into these total, end game total, auto, and total tele points is we're using formulas. So the sum function is really good. So if you end up where you're scouting a match and you're logging like, hey, this robot did this amount of top cubes or this amount of speaker shots and in teleop and this thing in auto and this different thing in endgame, then you can sum all of them up by weighting them with points. So for example, here I have the top cubes, O2 and P2 in my sum function. I have it in parentheses multiplied by 5. And what this does is, for the 2023 game, the top cubes in teleop were all weighted as 5 points. So I'm adding the top cubes and top cones and adding them together so that I get all the points that I would get from them, and then adding that with my same for middle and same for lower, and that gives me the total amount of teleop points that this team has earned. So once you do that, what you can do is you can add all three of these together into a sum function into C here, and that'll give you total points. And that's how basically we take all of our raw data and put it into different equations that we can use to make our lives a lot easier. So after we have this, we have our team, we have all the stuff that we want to work with. What we can do is we go up to here to File. This is how we do it in Google Sheets. I'm not really sure how you do it in Excel, as I haven't used that, but I'm sure there's a way to download the file in Excel format, and we're going to download it as a Microsoft Excel format. So we're just going to open Tableau on our computer, and once we have Tableau open, we're just going to click Microsoft Excel on the side here, and we're just going to open the sheet, and we're good. So if you do have a second sheet here, so for example, if I had 2 sheets of data, then in Tableau you are going to have to select and drag out the sheet from over here, whichever one you want to use. But if you only have one, it'll automatically pull that sheet for you to use. So what we're going to do here is first, before we work with the data, we want to make sure that our data types are correct. So in this case, for match, we have match is listed as a string, which is correct because we're going to be, string basically means label in this sense. So if I'm talking more general sense, the match is like a label term. We're not really calculating what number match or how much the matches add up to. We're more using it as a, in this match they did this thing. And that's what we're going to do with team as well, as Tableau counts as a number, but we want to change it to a string, as we want the team number to be a label for our data, not for the Tableau app to add the team numbers together to get a number. But we are going to leave all these other values as numbers, as that is what we are working with. However, if you do have your data in a true or false sense, you can select it to Boolean, and you can work with it that way if that works better for you. I personally just like having my data all in numbers. And so now if we click on sheet 1, we're going to go to worksheet. And first of all, first thing you want to do, sometimes Tableau does it for you, sometimes it doesn't. You're going to want to take your team and drag it up here. And now it's actually a label, because before it's just counting the amount of times a team is shown. So if I just show that to you here, if we take team right now that we switched to a label and we drag it anywhere into the columns page or the rows page, all it's going to do is just count the amount of time a team has shown up in the sheet. But we want the team to be a label, so we're going to drag it from the number section or the measure section to a dimension section. And once we do that, if I put this in the same place, we can now see that we have all of our different teams labeled. Now, first thing, Tableau is a pretty intuitive software once you start to learn about it, but it does take some getting used to. So first thing I want to do here is just make a simple bubble chart. So from the bubble chart, what we want to do is I'm going to try to chart my average auto points on the y-axis, average telly-up points on the x-axis, and I'm going to try to put endgame points in a different measure that we're going to see later. So before we do any of that, we want to make all of these values averages, as currently, if I put it in here, so let's say we want auto points, right? If I want to put that in my columns, I want to put telly points in my rows, and let's say I want to see my teams. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your dimension, put it in any of these here. I like label because it's easier to see all the numbers together. And currently you're going to see that auto points are 240, telly points are 400. That doesn't really make sense for a per match basis. And the reason this is doing it is because Tableau is looking at the entire chart. It's saying, okay, so you want the sum of all of the auto points that the one team that you've chosen has. So we're going to give you your 176, for example, had 234 total auto points in the event and 379 total telly points. But that's not really helpful for us to examine on a per match basis what they would average. So what we're going to do instead is turn these into averages. And so the way we're going to do that is first, what we're going to do is make a calculated field, which is one of the ways that you just try to make different dimensions, different measures. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to this little button over here, click the drop down, create calculated field, and I'm just going to label this team count. And so what we're going to do here is just, I name this team count because it's easier for me to use the count function and remember it that way. And we're just going to do count for team, and we're going to press OK. And now what we did was we're counting the amount of times a team shows up. So now if I put team count in here, it'll say, okay, 138 shows up 11 times, 131 shows up 14 times, 195 shows up 13 times, all that stuff. Alright guys, so we're back now, and what I basically made was average auto doc, average auto points, average endgame points, average telly cycles, average telly points, and average total points. And those are the values that we're going to be using for this video and this Tableau sheet specifically. Something I do want to note, average telly cycles, something you can do. The way that we count our scouting data is we have ones and zeros in the data for cubes and cones, and we didn't have them weighted. So what I did in here was I just had a sum function, added all of the different ways that you could score a game piece in teleop, and then divided by the team count to get my average teleop cycles. So that's the only thing that I did specifically, where it's like anything other than just sum of a value and divided by team count. So first thing for Tableau, we wanted to make a bubble chart. Now let's do that. So we have all of our different values that we're going to use. So let's go ahead. We have the columns page here. We have the rows page here. I said I want teleop in columns. Let's say I want auto in rows. And we get average auto points, average telly points. And now what we're going to do here is we want to sort them by team. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the team and drag it into label. However, you can also drag it into detail or color or anything like that. However, I find that label is the best way to see it, as you can just look at the chart and see where teams are ranked. So for example, 176, obviously the top team, and other teams you can see scattered. And if you zoom in here a little bit, you can see that the numbers start becoming clearer. And when you zoom out, the numbers get, the closer the bubbles are together, it's hard to see them. So once you zoom in, you can see all the team numbers are labeled, but when you zoom out, some of them disappear because it's just easier to format for us. So sometimes you do have to zoom into charts to see the full numbers. So what you can do is Tableau will do this thing called where it just holds the position on the XY axis. And if you want to get rid of that, you can just right click here and clear the axis range, and it'll put you back to your standard position on the graph. So what we want to do now is we have our average telly points, we have our average auto points. To make this chart show the most that it can for us, what I want to do, I want to put average endgame points and average total points in here as well. So what I like to do with average endgame points is I like to put them in color, as I think it's the best way for people to see how many endgame points a team normally gets. And right now, as you can see from the color, it's pretty hard to tell if you don't look really closely at them what color they are. So what you can do is click in the mark section here, you can turn them into circles, and it becomes a lot easier to see who's darker, who's lighter, and just find the scope of the actual endgame points. And something else that I'd like to have on my bubble charts is the average total points, just in detail. And okay, we're good. So I want to explain what the detail thing is. versus what the color size label is. So label, obviously we can see it's just labeling the teams. Color, you can see it just changes the color based on a scale of your points. Size, if I move this endgame to size, you can see it just becomes larger or smaller. I think it's hard to see the different scales personally that way, but if you like it more, you can use that, and you can also edit the sizes. So if you want it to be a lot larger, if you want to be a lot smaller, you can change all of that. It's all customizable. And the same thing with the colors. You can edit the colors. This is just the automatic. If I want to do orange, blue, or just lower, blue is higher. You can also change the color palette however you wish. So, however, there are going to be times where you don't want to clutter your sheet and you want to just make it so that when you hover over something, you can see the full breakdown of a team. So, for example, let's say I want to look at 176. I put my total points, average total points in here, and I could just hover over them. And when I hover over them, everything in detail is going to show up. So if I also put something like average telecycles and average auto dock in detail, they'll all show up when I hover on them, but not when I'm just looking at it. And it's not going to be immediately visible to me when I'm looking at it either. So if we just look at this, this looks really cluttered in my eyes. This is hard to parse what I want to get from it. So if you do have a lot of data points that you want to put into detail, what you can do is click on Tooltip, and now this gives you the formatting. So what I like to do, I like to bold my team, and I like to separate average, auto, tele, and endgame points from everything else, as they're, in my opinion, their own column. And then total points get separated, and then you can have however you want to format it. This is just how I think it looks the best for me. And you can click OK. And now, this looks a lot nicer in my eyes. I think it's a lot easier to visualize. You can see the breakdown of all the different stages of the game, as well as their average total points, their average cycles, and their average dock points. Obviously, the dock is the points. You don't have average 4 docks per game in auto. Now, that's basically just the whole bubble chart. Now, what I want to do is I want to make sure that people notice the bubble chart. So I'll click the naming, and I'll click bubble chart for NEDCMP, New England District Champs. And something else that you might find is pretty hard to do is look through whatever teams you want to look through. So let's say you're on Tableau and you're in the middle of a picking selection, your line selection, and you want to whittle down teams as they get picked. What you can do is you can take the team thing here, the dimension, put it over filters, and once you click OK, you can right-click this, and you can apply it to all of your worksheets. So now this goes for all of your worksheets. So all the future worksheets we have are all going to be going off of this filter as well. And you can show your filter and show a highlighter. And then if you click this little button here on the filter, you can put a multiple values drop down. And now I can start highlighting teams. Like let's say I want to look at 166. I can highlight their team. Or I can say, okay, 176 is the number 1 alliance captain. Let's take them off the board. They can't be picked. 177 got picked. 166 got picked. 1153 got picked. And from that, you can start whittling down and see what teams are left and who you can pick from, which I think is really helpful. Now, something else that we can do with this bubble chart is just, obviously, you can scroll over them, but you can also exclude certain teams with your, just clicking on them. If you don't like having a filter, you can just click on a team and say exclude, and now they're gone from that set. It does show up on your filter, but there's another way to do it, just in case you guys are wondering. So that is basically everything you can get from the bubble chart. I think it's a really helpful tool to see in general how a different competition has worked out, just in general. So now we're going to move on to a bar chart. And so what we're going to do is, in my bar chart, I like to have a stacked bar chart so that I can see the breakdown of every team and how they scored in different portions of the game. So what I'll do is I will put the teams in columns. And what we're going to do here is we're going to scroll all the way down, and we're going to go to measure values, and we're going to drag that and put that in rows. And now what measure values does is, if you put it in rows, it'll take all of the values in your entire measurables, and it'll just put them all stacked on top of each other. Now, obviously, we don't want this. We don't want just the amount of times they did auto mobility. That's not helpful for us. So we could start deleting these to whatever is helpful for us. So let's get rid of everything here that is not... in this case, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to do our average auto points, average endgame points, and average tele points, just to see how teams stack up in terms of average total points and break those down per the games. Now, it is kind of hard to see how teams get broken down, so what you can do is drag your measure names from detail into color, and now it's very easy to see. We have a little legend here on the side. So blue is auto, gold is endgame, and red is teleop. And so we can see, for example, this team 1247 has a very high endgame point breakdown, high portion of points that they score per match in their endgame, versus someone like, for example, 6328, who has a really small portion of points being scored in endgame and a lot more being scored in teleop and auto. And you could just see the breakdown here. And if you want to change the axis name, if you double click them, you can go down here to value and change this to average total points, which is what we are doing, because when you add all three of the averages together, we are getting the average total points per match. So that is just another way to break down. And obviously, if you want something like cycles in this as well, you want to see them, and you want average total points, you can put them in detail, and they will show up. And you can still do the same thing with tooltip, except all of your things will show up as measure values, and you can just space these out however you like, just for visual clarity. And now, look at that. I have my team, whatever measure values I'm going over, and whatever other things I want to put down here. And you still can label them if you so choose. It's just a lot harder to see. So that's basically all that is. And now we're going to be moving to the third chart, which I find the most helpful for just doing data breakdown in general, as I think it provides the most context for teams. As averages sometimes, although they're really helpful for finding how a team did overall, it's a lot harder to see the breakdown of a team using just averages. And I think that something like box and whisker chart is a lot easier for figuring out the context in a team's performance throughout an event. So I'll just name this bar chart for NEGCMP, and we'll move on. So let's say I want to do a bar chart, a box and whisker chart, for the average tele speaker cycles that a team does per match. And I want to see every single one of their matches plotted out on a bar chart. So what I can do is I can go over to team, put them in columns. I can go over to, let's say we wanted average tele cycles, put them in rows. And now what we can do is we can go to match in the detail. And now what we have is we have the average telecycles per match. And right now what we have is a stacked bar chart. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get all of the different stacked bar charts, and it'll show us averages per match. That's how it's sorting it. These two buttons, by the way, are for sorting if you want ascending or descending. I like ascending more, or descending more, as it's easier for me to visualize. So now if we want to change this to a box and whisker chart, what we can do is click over here on the Show Me tab, which has all of these different types of charts. I suggest you guys just play with Tableau, figure it out. Text tables, heat maps, highlight tables. There's maps that you can actually do if you have longitude and latitude, side-by-side bars, stack charts, circle views, tree maps, all that kind of stuff. For our purposes here, we're going to click box and whisker charts, and we're just going to reorder them. And now we can see where teams peaked and where teams did the best at in telecycles. So, for example, if I'm choosing a team and I am in the 8th alliance position, and I'm saying I want a team that I'm going to play the first alliance in my first round, and I don't think we're going to win that, so I want a team that has shown that they can pop off before, do insanely well. Let's look at where some teams peaked. So let's go watch, for example, 6933 in Qual Match 14. See what they did right. Can they replicate that in a match for our alliance? Maybe, maybe not. But you go do the research, figure out if these outliers are helpful, and you can pick your team based off of that. And you can also it's very helpful for figuring out context, as if you have the match number there, that you can figure out what match a team did really well in, what match a team peaked in, and you can just see, can they replicate that for my alliance in the playoffs, or can they do even better? Was their highest not perfect? And maybe we pick them based off of that. And so that's what you can do with box and whisker charts. It allows you to see a lot of context, as well as sometimes averages are dropping teams down because maybe they broke in a match. So for example, 1740 here peaked at 6 cycles, but their average is a lot lower than a bunch of other teams, for example, these two. But they did die. It looked like they died in one match, so that's bringing their average lower. Same thing with these teams here, who all died at some point during a match, so that's bringing their average lower than it normally would be, which is why I think box and whisker charts are really helpful for context, as you can examine the outliers, find out if the outliers are actually just outliers or if they're replicable, and you can use that in your line selection process. So these charts are great, but it is kind of hard to cycle through them, as if I change something here, let's say I don't want all the teams, I only want teams 166, 167, 175, and 178, then I have to cycle through all these charts to see them. However, what we can do is we can do this thing called a dashboard. So if I click the button here, it'll show up with a dashboard, and we can change our size here to automatic, so it'll resize for any screen it's on, and we can just drag our charts here. So now, if we drag our charts here, we can put team, let's put all, and it will change all of the teams. We can use highlights and such on both of our charts at once. We can do it on 3 charts at once if you so choose, and just figure out, and you can use your filters to get an all in one place for what you want to do. So for example, if you're doing a line selection, you want your averages, but you also want your box and whisker charts. This is perfect. You can put all of your charts in one place. Something that I also like to do with these types of box and whisker charts, I also love to examine auto points, as I think that auto is really hard to scout sometimes with averages, because sometimes you'll see a team that has, for example in 2024, you'll see a team that has an average of 10 points in 12 points in auto, and you'll say, oh, they only have a 2-piece, but they hit all the time. Or they could have a 4-piece that they hit half the time. And so it's really hard to distinguish where a team starts from or how much they peak at in auto. So doing this with a box and whisker chart allows us to see something like how much they peak at. And so what you can do is, if you have one box and whisker chart made, you could press duplicate here by right-clicking. And now we can just drag our average auto points into rows, and we can pull them all here. And now we can see here's where every single team peaked in auto, and here's where they did the worst, and you can find the averages through that. And let's say, for example, I wanted an auto without their dock points, right? And so in 2023, this was really important, as some teams didn't have autos, or some teams' auto points were being boosted by me having to dock. So what I can do is I can go to calculated field, create a calculation, auto without dock, and I can say the sum of total auto points, minus auto points, auto dock, and I can divide it by the team count. And now I can put that in here, and it'll give me all of the actual game pieces that team scores. So for example, 6328 had 19, their peak was 19 points without the dock. Or 176 was 19 points without the dock. And so we can use all of that to find out where teams peaked without the docking points involved, which I think is really helpful. So, and you can always put all these into your dashboard afterwards, even if you did start late, so you can section in quadrants, however you like to look at it. So something that I do want to note, if you are using a dashboard, as a lot of people do, is that if you choose a dashboard and you don't have the dashboard where the filters are on, so for example, I have the filters only showing on my bubble chart. In this dashboard, they won't show up. But what you can do is you can just click Show Filter, Show Highlighter, and then if we just reset this dash page for a second, we'll pull this back up, and all the stuff will show back up here. You just have to reformat it. And if you think that this measure names legend is being quite annoying, you can click it, right-click it to floating, drag it over here, resize it however you want, and now we have a much cleaner looking utility tool. So that is everything for this video of Robo Replay. I saw some people asking about Tableau online. I took a little course on it, and I think it's been really helpful for the past 2 years, as I've also been doing a project that I'll link in the description of this video on Chief Delphi, trying to get data from all around New England into events, and hopefully Team 1073 will be running that next year, but we will see. So that is all for this video. Hopefully you guys found this helpful for your team. My main suggestion is go use Excel, go use Tableau. It is the best way to learn something, is to actually go use it and mess around with it, find out what works for you, and whatever works for you, works best for your team, that's what you should do, not what I find works best for me. I'm just sharing what I like. So that is everything. Thank you for watching. If you have more questions, put them in the comments. I'll try my best to address them, but I am not a professional. I am just a kid who likes data software. So that's all for this video. Have a lovely day, and thank you for watching another video of Robo Replay.